Hi and welcome along to Robbie's Racing Line. I know, you know me for football, you know me for Arsenal, you know me for DR Sports, talking about the Premier League. You didn't know that I know my F1, did you? I love F1. Brilliant. I've been to many races. I remember last year I went to Silverstone. I've been to Monza before. I love it. I absolutely love it. Prefer it when it's not as one-sided as it was last year. And hopefully this year, we're going to get some better racing and somebody can go and sort out that Red Bull. Anyway, what I thought I'd do first of all is take a look at some of the new cars that have come out, because this is a time of year where everybody sort of reveals their new car, how it looks, the livery on it, or livery, whichever way you want to pronounce it. Now, of course, that don't necessarily mean the car's going to be fast. I remember last year looking at some cars thinking, wow, that looks good. And then when it got out on the track, it was an absolute dud. So we wait to see what they're going to be like when they get out on the track. But let me take a look at some of the cars that have come out this year and how they look. I'm going to start with a car that I always kind of keep a little eye out. I've got a soft spot for, which is Williams. And the reason why I've got a little bit of soft spot for them is because my mate used to work there, and they did invite me into their garage one time at a race, and it was absolutely brilliant. But their car this year looks decent. And I'll tell you what, they could have a decent year. I thought they did all right last year. They've had a few years where they've been absolute pony. But last year they started getting their car together, and you never know, they could have a decent year. And the car looks decent this year as well. So Williams maybe, little shout to not win a race or anything, but to do okay. I like the look of the Haas. That's a nice looking car this season. I like the way that that's done. And I like the Alpine as well. That's quite striking, the way that they've designed that car and how that looks. Looks all right. This one here, the Stake. I mean, there's a couple of cars that have got new names to them. Stake and the Visa Cash App car. How can you call a car the Visa Cash App? But you've got to satisfy the sponsors. And if they say Visa Cash App for our cash, you got to go with it, right? That's the name of the car. Obviously, neither of those two cars, unfortunately, are going to have much of a chance to win this year. They're kind of making up the numbers. Let me focus on the big boys. Of course, Aston Martin had a good season last year. Nice looking car. Can they sort of step it up this year? I remember last year they started really, really well. And there was a lot of people sort of really talking them up, but they kind of was a bit disappointing towards the end of the season. Going to be really interesting to see what their car's like. It's a real nice looker. Of course, got the traditional Aston Martin green. McLaren. Of course, all these teams have kept the same drivers. I thought McLaren in some races last year were really, really impressive. Again, can they put a dent on Red Bull? They are one of the teams that can threaten, and I in particularly like Lando Norris. I think he's a really, really good driver. Love his character. Can they put a dent in it? Ferrari, which of course, for me, best looking car on the grid every single year. Love how the car looks this year. They've kind of gone with a more of a kind of old school look. Remember they sort of had a different sort of livery, I always get that word wrong, right? Last year, but their car's looking good this year. They've kind of gone back with a more traditional look. But can that Ferrari, which again was another car that started well, high hopes for, and it just didn't deliver. What can that car do this year? Especially with the fact that come next season, it'll be Lewis Hamilton in the front of that car, driving that. Will they be able to deliver better than they did last year? I thought Ferrari a bit disappointed last year. I thought they were going to do better than they did, the way they started off the season and the way they were talked about. And of course, there's Mercedes. Disappointing season for them last year. Lewis Hamilton's last season in a Mercedes, an absolute shock. I remember when it dropped that he was leaving to go to Ferrari. It dropped on transfer deadline day. That was the biggest transfer news. That was bigger than even any player being transferred. The fact that he was going to Ferrari. What's he going to do in his last season? Can he put a dent into that Red Bull? Can, this car produce? Because the Mercedes last year was very, very disappointing. I noticed that they've switched up their design a bit. They've sort of gone with what everybody else was going with. Remember, they went with this sort of revolutionary type design. It's been an absolute flop. But what can that car do this year? And can Lewis Hamilton go out on a high? And of course, finally, always looks good, the Red Bull, always a nice looking car. Can anybody stop this car? Can anybody stop Max Verstappen? I hope he doesn't just waltz away with every race like what he did last season. Listen, you can't blame. The one thing I want to say, right? He gets a lot of hate, Max Verstappen. I personally look at it, I say, you can't blame him. In any sport, you need a dance partner. You need styles. It's like when saying boxing, styles make fights. So you might have a boxer that's just like, all he does is he just great at his trade, great at his craft, just goes out there, he's clinical, just beats everyone. Then you would have another boxer who's a bit flashy, comes in. But when those two come up against each other, that's what makes the fight so good. But the problem is at the moment is that Max Verstappen is so far better than everybody else, and is so much better car than everybody else, that he just comes across as a bit boring sometimes. A bit like Man City in the Premier League. They've been accused of that, just because sometimes they're playing teams, they have all the possession, they start getting accused of being boring. It's not their fault. They're trying to play football. It's the opposition's fault. So can any of the opposition step up and give Max Verstappen a big fight this season? I really hope so. I really hope so, because I don't think it's good for Formula One that he's winning so easily. And again, as I said, it's not his fault. And all he wants to do is win, and he's doing it, and fair play to him. Actually, no, I'll give you my top five. The top 5 best looking cars. I'm gonna go at number 5. Let me go for this state car. I mean, it's a bit different, isn't it? Sort of luminous green type. Yeah, sort of Volt type colour. I'll go for that. At number 4, I'm gonna go for the Aston Martin. I always like that sort of traditional Aston Martin green colour. At number 3, I'll go for the Mercedes. Looking nice. I kind of liked it when it was all black. It's still got a bit more green trim on it, but I'll go for that at number 3. In number 2, the Red Bull. Not only is it fast, it looks good as well. And number 1, definitely the Ferrari, the glamour car on the track. But can it produce? We're going to find out this season. And you'll be able to check it out with me each and every week, where I'll be giving you my tips on who I think is going to win, what I think is happening in the world of Formula One right here on the channel. Any questions you've got for me, put them in the comments below. Right, I will try and answer as many of them as possible. You may want to ask me, what do I think Lewis Hamilton's going to do this season at Mercedes? Will he do better than he did last year? What about Lando Norris? Could he be a bit of a dark horse? Any question you want to ask me in the comments below, and subscribe here right now to the channel.